Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. I've got to tell you, I am absolutely pumped about this one because we're tackling something that literally impacts every single one of us, every single day, our food. Now, look, if you've been itching to eat a bit healthier, but the mere thought of completely overhauling your diet just makes your head spin, well, I've got some pretty fantastic news for you. Today, we're zoning in on some super simple, totally doable food swaps, all backed by the latest insights from Harvard Health. We're going to unprocess your diet step by step without turning your entire life upside down. Sound good? Let's get into it. But right out of the gate, I've got to ask you kind of a serious question. Are you eating public health enemy number one? Seriously, picture your kitchen for a sec. Do you have this notorious troublemaker sitting right there on your counter? Or maybe hiding out in the back of the pantry? Because the reality is, there's a really high chance almost all of us do. Ultra-processed foods have completely, and I mean literally, completely infiltrated our modern food system. So, why are we making such a big deal out of this? Well, a growing mountain of research from places like Harvard is showing a direct link between diets heavily loaded with ultra-processed foods and some pretty scary health risks. We're talking a significantly higher risk for heart disease, strokes, diabetes, cognitive impairment, and yeah, even mental health disorders. And a huge chunk of the blame goes to the massive, sneaky amounts of salt, added sugars, and unhealthy fats crammed into these things. Plus, let's be real, they are just engineered to be way too easy to overeat.
Okay, part one, defining ultra-processed foods.
All right, so by definition, ultra-processed foods are basically items that read like a science experiment. They've got these incredibly long lists of preservatives, colorings, artificial flavorings, and ingredients you'd literally never find in a normal home kitchen. Now, obviously, junk foods like soda and potato chips are the usual suspects here, right? But here's where it gets super tricky. A lot of these sneaky offenders are actually hiding behind healthy packaging. Yep. Deli meats, packaged bakery goods, protein bars, and those microwavable diet meals that claim to be so good for you, oftentimes, they're actually heavily processed.
I really love this brilliant analogy from Teresa Fung. She's an adjunct professor of nutrition over at Harvard. She says, it's the difference between a bag of potato chips and a potato. I mean, how perfect is that? It takes a super complex nutritional science concept and just hits the nail on the head, making it instantly click. Ultra-processed foods are simply things that are far, far removed from how they originally existed in nature. So, when you're checking out those nutrition labels, you really need to play detective for a minute. You're looking out for red flag ingredients. Things like dough conditioners, emulsifiers, artificial colorings, thickeners, or anti-caking agents. If you spot those chemical-sounding names, do yourself a favor and put it right back on the shelf. These terms are dead giveaways that the food has been aggressively modified to sit on a shelf longer, alter its texture, or just fake a better flavor.
Moving right along to part two, simple breakfast and bakery swaps. Let's start with your morning toast. Your typical prepackaged supermarket bread is probably packed with an eye-popping amount of additives. Stuff like those dough conditioners and preservatives we just talked about. Why? Well, because it has to survive a massive cross-country truck ride and then sit on a grocery store shelf for weeks without going bad. The incredibly simple swap here, grab your bread from a local bakery or even a local grocery chain that bakes fresh in-house. It just doesn't need all those chemical preservatives because it hasn't traveled 1,000 miles. It's so much closer to real, actual food. Okay, now this next one is super interesting. Flavored yogurts are sneaky. Supermarket aisles are practically groaning under the weight of all these yogurt options. But those pre-flavored sweet ones are almost always loaded with thickeners, artificial colors, and honestly just way too much sugar. So the smarter swap? Buy plain unsweetened yogurt. Most of those flavored ones are way too sweet anyway. Starting with plain means you are completely in the driver's seat when it comes to controlling the sweetness. And look, flavoring it yourself is ridiculously easy. It's a quick 3-step DIY process. Step 1, start with that plain, unsweetened yogurt. Step 2, grab some frozen fruit or berries and just hit the defrost button on your microwave. Step 3, stir that warm, naturally sweet fruit, or hey, even just a tiny spoonful of your favorite jam, right into the bowl. Boom. It literally takes seconds, and you've completely dodged a chemical cocktail while making an absolutely delicious morning parfait. Now, cereal. Cereal is another massive morning trap. Ready-to-eat cereals are definitely convenient, but the ones boasting about yogurt clusters or frosted bits are usually hiding surprisingly high levels of sodium and added sugar. Instead, swap those out for simple whole grain options where the actual grain is the very first ingredient on the box. Think shredded wheat or bran flakes, and you can easily jazz them up. Toss in a handful of nuts, maybe some sunflower seeds, or a bit of unsweetened dried fruit for that perfect crunch.
All right, part 3, upgrading meats, cheeses, and dressings.
So you're making a sandwich for lunch. Those prepackaged deli meats and cold cuts hanging in the plastic aisle, total processing pitfall. They're almost always pumped full of sodium, fat, and a bunch of preservatives just to keep them looking fresh inside that plastic. A way better move, stroll over to your supermarket's prepared food section. You can usually find minimally processed, whole roasted poultry like chicken breast or lean beef that you can just slice up at home. Just one quick tip though, ask the person behind the counter how the meat was prepared. If it was soaked in a heavy marinade, that can sneak a ton of salt right back in.
Now, this next one brilliantly illustrates a hidden issue that catches almost everybody off guard: cheese. Look, we all know a slice of real cheddar is better than those weird, floppy cheese product singles. But grabbing a bag of pre-shredded or crumbled cheese, yeah, actually a mistake. The shredded stuff in those convenient little bags usually contains anti-kicking agents and mold inhibitors to keep it from clumping together. The fix? Just buy a solid block of natural cheese. You ditch the preservatives, the flavor is honestly so much fresher, and you can shred it yourself in no time flat, especially if you toss it through a food processor.
And what about a lunchtime salad? Pre-bottled dressings are an absolute additive minefield. I mean, think about it. They need to stay perfectly blended, smooth, and pourable while sitting unrefrigerated on a store shelf for months on end. That takes a whole lot of chemical emulsifiers and thickeners. The much smarter swap is throwing together a homemade oil and vinegar dressing. It's a massive, absolute game changer for your health.
And hey, if you're thinking, ugh, making my own dressing sounds like way too much effort, you've got to try this 1-minute routine. Just grab an empty jar, pour in a splash of oil and some vinegar. Toss in whatever herbs and spices you already have sitting in the pantry. Want it creamy? No problem. Crumble in a little blue cheese, maybe add a tiny dab of mustard to really make the flavors pop, or even drop in a spoonful of that plain Greek yogurt we talked about earlier. Twist the lid on tight, give it a really good shake, and you're done. Literally a custom dressing, 0 emulsifiers required.
Moving into the afternoon, part 4, smarter snacks and pizza sauces. Okay, 3 p.m. rolls around and we all get that craving for something crunchy, right? And let's be realistic here. Sometimes a sad little celery stick just doesn't cut it when you really want a chip. But most chips are ultra-processed, so swap them out for a handful of nutrient-packed nuts, or maybe some fiber-rich popcorn. Just, pop it on the stove instead of using those chemical-lined microwavable bags. Or look for a brand of whole grain crackers that only has 2 or 3 super simple ingredients and low salt. You still get that highly satisfying crunch, but you're actually feeding your body real food. Finally, let's talk dinner. Who doesn't absolutely love a good pizza or pasta night? The problem is, those store-bought jars of sauce are notoriously loaded with crazy amounts of salt and weird sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup just to artificially pump up the flavor. But it is so effortless to unprocess this. Next time, just grab a plain can of no salt-added tomato puree, drizzle in a glug of olive oil, and stir in your favorite Italian seasonings. Bam! You've got a quick, wholesome, completely homemade sauce in the exact amount of time it takes to struggle with a tight jar lid.
And finally, part 5, the ultimate key takeaway. As we wrap this up, I really want to leave you with this super reassuring quote from Teresa Fong at Harvard. She says, "We can't avoid processed foods completely. The key is to avoid those that have less nutritional value. So please, don't stress yourself out trying to be absolutely flawless. Completely avoiding anything processed in our modern world is basically impossible, and frankly, you don't need to do it anyway. It's just about making those slightly better, less processed choices where we easily can, and making sure we're prioritizing real nutritional value." Which brings us to the very end of today's explainer, and I want to leave you with a direct challenge right now. Out of these 8 simple, completely actionable swaps, which one are you going to try today? Are you going to grab that block of cheese instead of the shredded bag? Are you going to shake up your own salad dressing in a mason jar? Pick just one single thing, make it a habit, and ask yourself, how much better is your body going to feel a year from now just by ditching a few unnecessary chemicals today? Thanks so much for hanging out and learning with me, and I will see you in the next explainer.